Lord God, we thank you for the opportunity to be here studying together your word. Help your word inspire us and help it to educate us about you and your faith and how you've cared for us over all these years. We ask this in your name. Amen. Okay, so last time we were talking about the death of the firstborn. So we saw the movie, and the movie went into an awful lot of elaborate stuff, but when we read the scripture, how did they say the death of the firstborn was announced?
Wailing?
I mean, who decided to tell who that the death of the firstborn was announced?
Moses told Pharaoh, right?
Yeah.
Right. There was none of this Pharaoh did the death of the firstborn in the scriptures.
Yeah.
So all that scene with him and Ann Baxter was apparently made up, or if somebody wrote it
Then
out.
how did they know if they didn't know it was going to happen, you mean?
Moses told him.
Moses told them.
Right?
Not the Pharaoh.
No, Moses. Moses was told by God to tell them.
Right.
In the movie, it was like Moses finds out what God's going to do from Ann Baxter.
Pharaoh and...
Yeah, so that's not the way it worked. Moses had in advance what he was supposed to tell them.
And that's why they did the blood on the doorway.
Right, that was exactly how they identified
Jerusalem.
who they were and who they weren't and whatnot. So basically, good morning.
Morning.
Sorry, I'm late. That's all right. Like I said, in the actual text, it talks about not only blood, but a certain type of blood.
Sheep blood or something.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and that way the angel of death would pass over. That giving it the name Passover. I don't know what the Hebrew equivalent of it is, but that's where it's got its name from. All right. So now Moses has told Pharaoh what's going to happen. So would somebody read Exodus 12, 29 to 31?
Trying to get
Or 30 rather, 29 and 30.
Okay, Exodus 12, 29 and 30 you said?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let me get to the right, I think I got to turn my page here. Oops. Okay, 29. At midnight, the Lord struck down all the firstborn in Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh, who sat on the throne, to the firstborn of the prisoner who was in the dungeon, and the firstborn of all the livestock as well. Pharaoh and all his officials and all the Egyptians got up during the night, and there was loud wailing in Egypt, for there was not a house without someone dead.
You remember at the last scene of the movie, you saw that cloud coming down around the moon and everything. That was how they did it in the film. It was probably, looking at the type of cloud it was probably dry ice of some sort. Because dry ice when it clouds, it hangs close to the ground. So this is what has happened. In the movie, it's a lot more elaborate, but the idea is that the firstborn of the Egyptians was struck down before Pharaoh did anything to the Hebrews. So now Pharaoh is got a problem, so he needs to do something, and he chooses to let the people go. So would somebody like to read chapter 12, verses 31 to 39?
I'll read it. During the night, Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron and said, "Up, lead my people, you and the Israelites. Go worship the Lord as you have requested. Take your flocks and herds as you have seen and go, and all will bless you." The Egyptians urged the people to hurry and leave the country, for otherwise, they said, we will all die. So the people took their dough before the yeast was added and carried it on their shoulders in kneading troughs wrapped in clothing. The Israelites did as Moses instructed and asked the Egyptians for articles of silver and gold and for clothing. The Lord had made the Egyptians favorably disposed towards the people. They gave them what they asked for, so they plundered the Egyptians. The Israelites journeyed from Ramses to Succoth. There were about 600,000 men on foot, besides women and children. Many other people went up with them, as well as large droves of livestock, both flocks and herds. With the drought they had brought from, with the dough they had brought from Egypt, they baked cakes of unleavened bread. The dough was without yeast because they had been driven out of Egypt and did not have time to prepare food for themselves.
Think about this. How many were there?
600,000 is that.
600,000 people get up and leave in the middle of the night.
Well, in that film, they showed, just kept showing people.
Yeah, right, yeah, well, in the film, it was a lot more organized than that. But anyway, the point of the matter is 600,000. How many started in Joseph's day? 70. So 70 somehow has grown up to be 600,000 people. That's almost twice the size of the city of Cleveland. So that would be like Brian being told, you have to lead the city of Cleveland out of bondage tonight, and then throw in another couple of 100,000.
Get me back in the car.
Yeah.
You'll march them all the way to Youngstown, take over that town. You know?
What he needs to.
Stop and think. 600,000 people. You only got to do two things with them: feed them and water them.
I can't even imagine.
Think about that. 600,000. And then you got to organize them somehow. Remember, you don't have bullhorns or any of the other kind of stuff. I mean, just who's responsible for make sure they all go in the same direction? And then you got herds that are running around. You got to keep them in place. 600,000 people. Now, think of it this way. When you run a marathon, say the Cleveland Marathon, there's so many runners. Only the elite get to go in the front row. There's so many runners that by the time they're all lined up in the back, the last one takes like almost a minute and a half or 2 minutes to cross the finish line. Or starting line, rather. I mean, so they're already 2 minutes behind everybody else. Well, stop and think how hard it is to get 600,000 people moving in the same direction, and how long it would take if somebody was just standing there for that entire crowd to pass them. The average, I don't know about you folks, but the average person can walk 20 to 25 miles in a day if they're in decent health.
I don't think I'm in decent health. I can
I
do
was
a
gonna say,
mile
I'm
or
glad you put it that way.
so. I can do a mile or so, not.
I've walked 25 miles in a day.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, God, no.
I walked
Not even
all-
on my best day.
I walked all the way from downtown Chicago to my house almost in Indiana, so it can be done.
Wow.
A mile's about it for me.
But even at that rate, 600,000 people, you figure the best they can probably do is half that. So they're going 10 miles a day with this humongous crowd.
Well, I've been in the breast walk, for breast cancer, and there's hundreds of people, and even that's like a little overwhelming because all these people, everybody's walking, and so I can't even imagine 600,000.
And animals.
Yeah, well, that's another thing too.
So you gotta be, that's right, you
That
gotta
could
be
be
food
seasonal
for the
time.
animals too. So you gotta carry all this stuff.
Yeah, plus you're carrying
And
it.
In the movie,
most of
they
these
had
people-
wagons. I don't know if they had wagons or not.
Some
According
kind of old, they look like old wagons.
Yeah.
I mean, they weren't like the kind we have now, but.
Yeah, they're the old wooden wheel things.
Yeah.
But then again, where would they get them from? They get
But probably not everybody had one. It's probably just a.
if you watch the movie, most of these people were carrying everything on their shoulders. So imagine if you're a guy 40 years old having to carry all your family's possessions and the food on your shoulders, and you're walking.
No, I can't.
Well, I can't either, but this is what it said. So,
Doesn't mean it's not true, it just means it's
yeah,
unusual circumstances.
yeah, so, all right, but that, I want you to understand though, the magnitude of what we're talking about here. And what we're gonna find out later is Moses had this bad habit of wanting to run everything himself.
He didn't delegate.
Not initially. That's one of the stories that we're going to get to eventually, that everybody in the business world uses to show what delegation is. But the only other person, according to the film, that had any responsibility was Joshua.
Didn't his brother have help?
No, I mean as far as getting these people lined up and getting them running in the right direction and all these other kinds of things. So basically, this is the magnitude of what we're talking about. I can't imagine it personally. I mean, think of Sherman's March to the Sea, and how he only had like a few thousand men, and they were scrounging and taking food from everybody, and you know, that was like 1/100th of the size of this crowd. So that's when all of this starts. Now, at the same time, while all this is going on, the author writes down again what the rules for Passover are. And that's Exodus 12:40-50. So does someone would like to read that?
40 to 50?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, the length of time the Israelite people lived in Egypt was 430 years. At the end of the 430 years to the very day, all the Lord's divisions left Egypt. I understand. Because the Lord kept vigil that night to bring them out of Egypt, on this night all the Israelites are to keep vigil to honor the Lord for the generations to come. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, "These are the regulations for the Passover. Lord. No more foreigner is to eat of it. Any slave you have brought may eat of it after you have circumcised him, but a temporary resident and a hired worker may not eat of it. It must be eaten inside one house. Take none of the meat outside the house. Do not break any of the bones. The whole community of Israel must celebrate it. An alien living among you who wants to celebrate the Lord's Passover must have all the males in his household circumcised. Then he may take part like one born in the land. No uncircumcised male may eat of it. The same law applies to the native born and to the alien living among you." All the Israelites did just what the Lord had commanded Moses and Aaron, and on that very day the Lord brought the Israelites out of Egypt by their divisions.
So they had to get in a line
To get
and go to the house and get the food. To get the food for the sacrifice Passover, they had to get in a line, and each person went and got the food and get back out next one.
Well, the only concern about that is,
Circumcision.
circumcision as an adult? Oh my God.
well, that's part of it, but the other part of it is, your 600,000 people is walking through the desert. Where in the heck are they gonna find a house?
Well, as somebody would say, it's not that hard to construct a temporary house.
Yeah,
It isn't that
for
hard.
600,000 people?
Yeah, but they're not all going in there, it's like, it could be one or two at a time go in and come back out. It's a little
Yeah,
house.
even at that rate, it'll take like a month.
Cause you wouldn't have to make it that fancy, just make it have walls and a roof and.
All right, so basically, these were the rules that went forward. Now, if you recall, there was an incident earlier that we read where Moses was on his way back to Egypt, where God was very upset at him. What was the reason why? Circumcision. Remember, it was Moses' wife that intervened and said, you know, let's take care of this.
Yeah,
He was a prince of Egypt, you know, he had no reason to be circumcised, even though he was in fact a Hebrew.
Yeah, I would
So-
think that circumcision would be a good way to say, yeah, I believe, I'm willing to be circumcised.
Well, it turns out that people point to that earlier passage and say that is where circumcision became the law. It was when Moses had to have it done for himself. So it became the law from that point forward. And keep that in mind, that this wasn't just invented. This was actually in the scripture and people read it, and so as a result it's been that way ever since.
And
My
my parents,
Jewish men now are not circumcised.
Say it again?
I thought Jewish men now are not circumcised.
They're not?
Some sects are not, but I guarantee you the people up on the corner probably
I'm
are.
sure the Orthodox are.
Yeah.
Because they follow like,
They follow every word.
you know, they follow pretty much everything that they're supposed to follow, you know, kind of
see,
thing.
my parents said that boys should be circumcised because it helped to lessen infection in the
Infection,
future.
that's what I heard too.
Yeah.
So they.
But the point of the matter is, if you go up, if you drive home past the corner like we do, you will see them walking out
Yeah.
there with their traditional, with their prayer book, with their phylacteries, with all the other stuff.
But they go everywhere that way.
Yeah, I
They
know,
go
that's what I'm
everywhere.
saying. That is what, according to the scripture, that is the way they are supposed
Yeah,
to
'cause
be.
they wear the, I forget what you
Long
call
hair,
it,
like-
they have those locks.
Yeah.
They wear the hat and everything. It's part of their,
But then there are some that don't have those locks, just have the hat.
yeah.
Right, and
They're
there are some,
different orders or whatever.
and then there's some I work with, you wouldn't know if they were Jewish unless they told you.
Yeah,
But it's the same thing with the Amish. There are conservative Mennonites who can get away with a whole lot of stuff. And there are the Amish who can't.
The ones that I know, they can't drive. They're not allowed to drive cars. They have to have somebody drive them everywhere.
and then there are extreme groups of Amish that are different Amish. Like I heard of one called Swarthout.
Mm.
There's a different type of Amish than
Yeah, that's
regular.
different sects because the real severe ones like don't have electricity.
Right.
Yeah.
But they're not allowed to, the one I know, he's not allowed to drive, but he's allowed to use
You
a
can go
phone.
in a oh,
But
okay.
he can go in the car, but he's
Yeah,
not
they
allowed
just
to
can't
drive.
drive it, can't
Yeah, he has to have a driver, but he can use a phone.
Well, hardly no Amish.
And he has his own business.
Yeah, most Amish don't have a phone and they don't drive.
Well, I don't know if it's his phone, but he has, he,
Well,
They're
there are
allowed
some
to
that
have
are-
a cell phone because it is not connected by
right,
a
that's
wire.
true, that's true,
But
yeah.
some of them are even more strict than that. Like you will only marry in our little sect.
Well, they're all, they're,
Our little sect. You cannot marry another Amish. You only marry in our sect.
Right.
And they have different rules for different parts.
yeah, but it just depends. My cousin married
Yeah.
an Amish guy and everybody's fine with it.
So it depends. There's different rules.
So my point is, each sect has a different
Mhm.
Yeah,
set of
like rules.
the rules and whatnot.
Yeah.
And the point of the matter is that it started at this time, and it started, with God telling Moses that, he has violated he has sinned or violated the law, and his wife fixed it. So, but anyway, that's where all that came from. So now you see the instructions. Now let's see what he says about the firstborn. That's Exodus 13, 1-16. Someone would like to take that on.
I don't know. Did you want to read it or not?
I'll do it. It's just
Okay.
trying to get my pages together. apart.
Sometimes it helps to wet your fingers.
Well, yeah, the two were sticking together. Okay. 1 to
16.
15, 1 to 16.
Yeah.
okay, that's that whole section. The Lord said to Moses, "Consecrate to me every firstborn male. The first offspring of every womb among the Israelites belongs to me, whether man or animal." Then Moses said to the people, "Commemorate this day, the day you came out of Egypt out of the land of slavery, because the Lord brought you out of it with a mighty hand. Eat nothing containing yeast. Today, in the month of Abib, you are leaving. When the Lord brings you into the land of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Hittites, and Jebusites, the land he swore to your forefathers to give you, a land flowing with milk and honey. You are to observe this ceremony in this month. For 7 days eat bread without yeast, and on the seventh day hold a festival to the Lord. Eat unleavened bread during those 7 days. Nothing with yeast in it is to be seen among you, nor shall any yeast be seen anywhere within your borders. On that day tell your son, I do this because of what the Lord did for me when I came out of Egypt. The observance will be for you, like a sign in your hand and a reminder on your forehead that the law of the Lord is to be on your lips. For the Lord brought you out of Egypt with his mighty hand. You must keep this ordinance at the appointed time, year after year. After the Lord brings you into the land of the Canaanites and gives it to you, as he promised on an oath to you and your forefathers, you are to give over to the Lord the first offspring of every womb. All of the firstborn males of your livestock belong to the Lord. Redeem with a lamb every firstborn donkey, but if you do not redeem it, break its neck. Redeem every firstborn among your sons. In days to come, when your son asks you, what does this mean? Say to him, with a mighty hand the Lord brought us out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. When Pharaoh stubbornly refused to let us go, the Lord killed every firstborn in Egypt, both man and animal. This is why I sacrifice to the Lord the first male offspring of the Lord, every woman, and redeem each of my firstborn sons. And it will be like a sign on your hand and a symbol on your forehead that the Lord brought you out of Egypt with his mighty hand.
What does he mean when he says redeem?
That's a good question. My suspicion is what he's really saying is you make a sacrifice of an animal that redeems. So that makes good all of your firstborn in your family. Okay? It was, remember Abraham and Isaac? He was gonna, he was told to sacrifice his firstborn, would have been Isaac. And then when the time came, an animal just happened to show up. So
Let me read what this says here real quick. Okay, obtain, release, redeem, by means of payment, every firstborn donkey. The economic importance of pack animals allowed for their redemption through sacrificing a lamb. Since donkeys were not sacrificed animals, their blood was not to be shed. Every firstborn among your sons. Humans were to be consecrated to the Lord by their life, not by their death.
So, this is where the notion that the firstborn is somehow special comes from.
And it goes on to say that Jesus was supposedly the firstborn of his family, it says.
Yeah.
So that he had this done too. He was like sealed as being the firstborn of his family at a certain age.
Yeah, well, they had to bring him to the temple and all the other kind of stuff because of that. But the point of the matter is that the firstborn now has been set apart. And as you read the scriptures farther, you begin to learn that the firstborn inherits all of these duties that the other...
But it's firstborn men.
Yeah.
Well.
Well, that's what he says. Every firstborn male.
Yeah.
So, so that's when all of a sudden this idea that the firstborn is somehow special or smarter or something. That's why kings are always, thrones are given to the firstborn, and the firstborn may be a total knucklehead, but that's the way it goes. It's and in England they finally changed Queen Elizabeth changed the rules.
Well,
So now that's the firstborn regardless of sex.
Right.
she was the firstborn. And it was a good thing Charles wasn't king at the beginning because he wouldn't have been too good.
Well, we don't know that, but
He was a real problem. He was a troublemaker. He got in lots of trouble. The queen was not too happy with Charles for a long time.
well, remember he came here. He graced this area for you. He came and actually set foot in this area for you. What a nice guy. He toured the mill, And then I forget where he went, somewhere on this side of town, he went and planted some tree.
Oh,
There was a
really?
big deal about it. It was like 1978 or 79 he was here. So, but no, he went through the mill and they were so afraid of offending the guy that they dressed up a bunch of salaried guys as hourly guys and made them tour guides and everything. And so-
And he was like 76 when he became king. So it's hard to say how long he'll be king, because he was very old when he finally was made king.
Do you remember him coming here? I don't remember. Oh, I do?
Oh, it was a big deal. Yeah, we had a mill helmet made for him with a Union Jack on
Really?
it.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, the point of the matter is that the firstborn somehow got set apart, and this is where it says that happened. So now that he's got those two pieces of business out of the way, the writer decides to get back to the story at hand. Would somebody like to read chapter 13 of Exodus 17 to 22?
Sure, okay. When Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them on the road through the Philistine country, though that was shorter. For God said, if they faced war, they might change their minds and return to Egypt. So God led the people around by the desert road toward the Red Sea. The Israelites went up out of Egypt ready for battle. Moses took the bones of Joseph with him because Joseph had made the Israelites swear an oath. He had said, God will surely come to your aid, and then you must carry my bones up with you from this place. After leaving Succoth, they camped at Etham on the edge of the desert. By day the Lord went ahead of them in a pillar of cloud to guide them on their way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, so that they could travel by day or night. Neither the pillar of cloud by day nor the pillar of light by night left its place in front of the people, so it never left them.
So who's really leading this expedition?
God is really
Yes.
right.
God is showing them the way. And keep in mind that you've got 600,000 people. You're trying to keep them all, going in the right direction. Notice it also says travel by day and night. I'm walking. I don't know about this night part. I mean, you got to have rest in there somewhere. But the point of the matter is that they are leaving one town going to Etham on the edge of the desert. So they're going around the long way. And they will eventually end up at the Red Sea, which we know something eventful is going to happen then.
It's interesting too, they're talking about the Philistines. They were the ones that had to do with David and Goliath. It was the Philistines.
Yeah, well, so did Samson too. Samson didn't like the Philistines.
So the Philistines have always been a problem throughout the Bible, and I don't know if they ever aren't a problem, but.
So then things did not turn out all that well back at the ranch. I will read chapter 14 and listen to what happens back in Egypt while all this is going on. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Tell the Israelites to turn back and encamp near Pi Haroth, between Migdol and the sea. They are to encamp by the sea directly opposite of Baal Zephon. Pharaoh will think the Israelites are running around the land in confusion, hemmed in by the desert. And I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and he will pursue them." Sounds strange?
Sounds familiar.
But he did that before.
"But I will gain glory for myself through Pharaoh and all his army, and the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord." So the Israelites did this. When the king of Egypt was told the people had fled, notice the word fled, he asked them to leave. So, that's a strange choice of words. Pharaoh and his officials changed their minds about them and said, "What have we done? We have let the Israelites go and have lost their services. So he had his chariot made ready and took his army with him. He took 600 of the best chariots along with other chariots of Egypt, with officers over all of them. The Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, so that he pursued the Israelites, who were marching out boldly. The Egyptians, all Pharaoh's horses and chariots, horsemen and troops, pursued the Israelites and overtook them as they camped by the sea near Pi-Haroth, opposite Baal-Zephon. Okay, in those days, if you're anywhere near a desert, you got that many horses coming, you're going to see this cloud coming at you. So 600 chariots plus, and each chariot probably had at most 2 people on it, so that's about a couple of thousand soldiers, I would guess, are going to go after 600,000 people. Still, it sounds pretty ominous, but then something else happened. Starting at verse 10. As Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up, and there were the Egyptians marching after them. They were terrified and cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, "Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die? What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt? Didn't we say to you in Egypt, 'Leave us alone, let us serve the Egyptians'? It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the desert." Sounds like pretty grateful people, doesn't it? Moses answered the people, "Do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance of the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only be still." Then the Lord said to Moses, "Why are you crying out to me? Tell the Israelites to move on. Raise your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea to divide the waters so that the Israelites can go through the sea on dry ground. I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians so they will go in after them. And I will gain glory through Pharaoh and all his army, through his chariots and his horsemen. The Egyptians will know that I am the Lord when I gain glory through Pharaoh, his chariots, and his horsemen." Then the angel of God, who had been traveling in front of Israel's army, withdrew and went behind them. The pillar of cloud also moved from the front and stood behind them, coming between the armies of Egypt and Israel. Throughout the night the cloud brought darkness on one side and light on the other side, so neither went near the other all night long. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and all the night the Lord drove the sea back with a strong east wind and turned it into dry land. The waters were divided, and the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground, as with a wall of water on the right and on their left.
See, the thing about the desert, being buried in a desert, is something, if you read books or watch movies, you understand. Even the United States, years ago in the desert, somebody died, where the heck did you bury them in the desert? Because there wasn't hardly anything to dig up and put over them to bury them. The ground was not that secure like it is in Ohio to bury people. So that was part of the thing that they were saying, we don't want to be buried in the desert, because the animals would get them after they were dead.
Or thieves.
You can't really bury people well.
That was what happened in North Africa.
You can't really bury people well.
They had to put guards on the cemetery for the American soldiers because thieves were coming in and stealing everything. Anyway, so think about this. First of all, the Red Sea is not that little pond that's over here in Wickliffe. It's quite wide. And to make dry land on something that's been underwater for, I don't know, centuries maybe, that took some doing. You had to make it dry land, otherwise there was no way they'd get across. Anything with wheels on it gets stuck. So all of this is happening, and still, you got a wall of water on this side and a wall of water on that side. All Moses has to do now is figure out how to get 600,000 people and animals through that gauntlet before anything should go wrong. That's all. I think there was a lot of fear among the people. I mean, let's face it, you're walking along and all of a sudden there's this big wall of water next to you and it's like,
You're walking through the sea.
yeah, you're walking through the sea, you know.
Whoa.
By the way, I guess part of the tour, they used to show in Hollywood how they did that. Anyway, the point of the matter is that, you know, you gotta get all these people through. And this cloud, this pillar of fire, is keeping the Egyptians on the other side. Now, people have always wondered, well, can't you go around it somehow? But apparently you couldn't, because they just stood there and they were, you know, I'm surprised half of them didn't just turn around and go back home. But, so you see the scenario. All of these people are now funneling through this, what do you want to call it, gateway or whatever,
Almost
to
like
get
a
to the
tunnel.
other side.
Yeah, almost like a tunnel.
Yeah, almost.
Yeah.
So then it goes on in verse 23. The Egyptians pursued them, and all Pharaoh's horses and chariots and horsemen followed them into the sea. During the last watch of the night, the Lord looked down from the pillar of fire and cloud at the Egyptian army and threw it into confusion. He made the wheels of their chariots come off so that they had difficulty driving. And the Egyptians said, "Let's get away from the Israelites. The Lord is fighting for them against Egypt." Then the Lord says to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the sea so that the waters may flow back over the Egyptians and their chariots and horsemen." Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and at daybreak the sea went back into its place. The Egyptians were fleeing toward it, and the Lord swept them into the sea. The water flowed back and covered the chariots and the horsemen, the entire army of Pharaoh that had followed the Israelites into the sea. Not one of them survived.
So did the Pharaoh die or not? I don't know if it really says.
That was my question.
It doesn't really say in here, and the movies.
In the movie, he
doesn't say-
didn't.
But
Yeah.
I wonder if he died too.
Well, knowing Pharaoh, he probably said, "Go at it, guys, I'll watch
Yeah,
from
he was
here."
standing right up there.
Yeah, who knows? It doesn't say.
But his line, like in the New Testament, does his Pharaoh's line follow through to Jesus' time?
Or did they die out because his son died?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I'll have to look that one up for next week. The Israelites went through the sea on dry ground, and on water. That day the Lord saved Israel from the hands of the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians lying dead on the shore. And when the Israelites saw the great power of the Lord displayed against the Egyptians, the people feared the Lord and put their trust in him and in Moses his servant. So, think about that. We all learned that in Sunday school, didn't we? That was one of the stories they taught us. But think of the logistics of how that had to happen. 600,000 people going through there. It probably took, I'm guessing, the better part of it, maybe taken longer than a day to get them all through. And because some of them were, probably walking, with infirmities. Some of them had herds. Some of them had wheeled carts. Some of them had, carrying stuff.
They were elderly.
And some were elderly. So you got to get all of these people through there. And then Moses is to raise his staff because he's the only one that knows that all of his people are safe. And now, there have been a lot of explanations as to how this could have happened, and there's all kinds of theories. But as far as Christians are concerned, it's not a question of how it happened, it's a fact that, it's the fact that it did. And it influenced who we are. Because, it could have been over right there. So, now whether Pharaoh died or not, I doubt it, but I have a sneaking suspicion he didn't go in. He was going to wait till everybody else was across before he got involved. So, Now, in the movie, he does come back home and Ann Baxter is mad at him and all kinds of other things. Whether that really happened or not, I have to look up. The point of the matter is that this was a miracle, and who are we to decide whether it really happened or didn't? I mean, a lot of people say this could never have occurred at all, therefore why bother to worry about the faith? I mean, this is all a made-up story. A lot of people still think that some of the scriptures are like the Iliad and the Odyssey. Either of you ever read the Iliad and the Odyssey? The Iliad and the Odyssey were the histories of one was of the Greeks, one was of the Romans, and they paid a guy to write it. And there's all kinds of interesting stuff in there. Like, for example, that's where some of the mythical characters come from mythology and all that other kind of thing. So they paid somebody to write it and wrote a good story. None of it ever happened, but they wrote a good story. That's what a lot of people think this is. But we don't think it's that. There's too much connection. The law of Moses that comes from this goes all the way into the New Testament. Don't forget that. The law of Moses had to come from somewhere. Somebody had to, somebody didn't just make it up someday. The reality of it is, it did connect. So a lot of the things that we see today come from what's written here. So keep that in mind as we go forward. A lot of the stuff. Everybody complains, well, Moses never really wrote this. Who cares who wrote it? That's not the point. The point is that, we are connected hundreds, thousands of years to these people, whether we like to admit it or not. Now, from this point forward, we are going to be going through periods that are not in the film. And the reason they're not in the film is because they're not good Hollywood. But they have a lot to do with the Israelites, why they wandered as long as they did, why they didn't just take action immediately, all the kinds of different miracles that God performed. That's not in the film, but it's in here. So we're going to be starting with that next week.
So then